Success often leads to imitation, especially in the film industry. Many have tried to recreate or imitate the formula of a highly successful film in order to achieve success. For instance, when Star Wars became a hit, many films tried to copy it, and more recently, when Marvel gained success with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, other studios tried to create their own cinematic universes. That is precisely what happened to 1979's Alien, a film that achieved huge success both critically and financially, winning countless awards including a Saturn Award for Best Science Fiction Film and an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. It was also submitted to the National Film Registry of the Library of Congress and spawned countless imitators, such as Event Horizon, as well as more recent films like 2017's Life, and I can totally see why. Alien is a first-rate classic. It is not only one of the best science fiction horror movies ever made, but it is one of the greatest movies of all time. Judiciously, Alien is a very slow-paced film. The first 40 or so minutes are dedicated to establishing the characters, setting, and overall mood of the picture. The film opens with some slow establishing shots of the commercial starship Nostromo's exterior and interior. The set design is pristine. The inside of the ship looks like a real environment. There's nothing lustrous or clean. It looks and feels dirty and lived in, and as such it feels tangible. At the same time, the ship is industrialized, dark, contained, and claustrophobic, and as someone who loves contained, small-scale horror, that's a big win for me. It's such a well-realized location, and the same could be said for the crew, as the film provides a perfect sense of how everyone works together. You have Dallas, the ship's captain, Ash, the science officer, Parker and Barrett, the mechanics, and so on. It's very easy to understand how the ship is operated, and how it works. Writer Dan O'Bannon, director Ridley Scott, and the film's entire production crew created a universe that looks and feels real, lived in, and above all, like a world that can work. I would even go as far as to say that the film's depiction of an industrialized, dirty, and lived-in future is so tangible that I can actually buy it one day becoming a reality. Speaking of the crew, a lot of time is spent on characterization. Each character is exquisitely fleshed out with their own distinct personalities that impact the film's plot, and the film does everything it can to make us like and care about them. One way in which it achieves this is that there isn't a clear-cut protagonist at first. It's definitely more focused on the crew as a unit rather than a singular protagonist. For example, on first viewing, you would think the protagonist is Tom Skerritt's Dallas, seen as how he's the ship's captain, but when the alien gets him, you find out that's not the case, and that it is in fact Sigourney Weaver's Ellen Ripley who is the protagonist when she stands up and takes control of the situation and ultimately becomes the sole survivor. However, something I've really come to love about this movie is that with every rewatch, it becomes increasingly clear why Ripley survives. Throughout the entire film, she is the only character who follows procedure. When Dallas and Lambert return to the ship with Kane after he gets a facehugger attached to his face, Ripley refuses to let them in because she must follow quarantine procedures to prevent contamination. She is the only character who maintains a clear head throughout the entire film. Even Dallas, the ship's captain, goes against protocol and orders Ripley to let him, Lambert, and Kane in, and later is even willing to fly the shuttle back to the Nostromo despite repairs not being complete because he's afraid of what he's seen on LV-426. Unlike Ripley, Dallas fails to cope under pressure, and this combined with his carelessness is ultimately what gets him killed when he takes a wrong turn in the air vents. Ripley is a character that would go on to revolutionize women's roles in film. She is imbued with humanity, being sensitive, warm-hearted, and terrified of the alien. In fact, her fear is so tangible that her hair even starts to fall out. While she's not a straight-up action hero, at this point anyway, she defies all gender stereotypes of the time. She's not a femme fatale, nor is she a damsel in distress. She isn't a love interest, and she certainly isn't a sex object. She's a hard-as-nails, courageous, resilient, intelligent woman who doesn't need men to save her. Ellen Ripley is one of the greatest film characters of all time, a character that fundamentally changed how people perceive women's roles in film. The alien itself is a fantastic villain, and one that lives up to the film's title. It's an extraterrestrial creature, but like the meaning of the word alien, it is unfamiliar and unknown. Even with a series of prequel films, we still know so little about it. We don't know where it comes from, or what its purpose is, or if it even has a purpose. The creature is organic and humanoid, yet it appears to be biomechanical. So is it organic, machine, or both? It's phallic all over, but it has a feminine body. So is it male, female, a combination of the two, or neither? H.R. Giger designed the alien planet, derelict ship, and the alien itself. The alien's design taps into our fears of sexual violation in the most psychologically disturbing way possible. The creatures give birth via the facehugger, which attaches itself to the victim's face and orally rapes them, impregnating the host with its horrifying offspring, which the host is then forced to give birth to. Its design is laced with the sexual imagery typically associated with H.R. Giger's work. When the adult alien attacks its victims, it holds them down, either attacking with its incredibly phallic head and inner mouth or using its tail attached to its crotch. It doesn't look like it's killing its victims, it looks like it's raping them. It is one of the most nightmarish, most disturbing and frightening antagonists ever put to screen. It's a creature that taps into so many fears: sexual violation, dehumanization, disease, predation, the unknown, and of course, body horror. It even has acid for blood, so any attempt to kill it could mortally wound anyone that's unfortunate enough to be near it, or worse, melt through the hull of the ship, potentially killing everyone. It's virtually unstoppable. All of these elements come together to make what is still to this day one of the most terrifying monsters of all time. To add to the terror, the alien isn't even the only villain. The employers of the characters, Weyland-Yutani, indicate they have some knowledge of the derelict ship and its contents, and deliberately send the crew of the Nostromo to bring back an alien specimen at all costs, deeming the crew to be expendable. The company poses an indirect threat because they want the alien brought to Earth for their bioweapons division, and the characters know they can't let this happen because if the alien gets back to Earth, all life could be at risk. But to make matters worse, Weyland-Yutani have hidden an android amongst the crew in the form of Ash, to ensure the creature's survival and return to Earth. Ian Holm as Ash is one of my favorite parts of this movie. I love watching it knowing he's an android because there are so many cutaways, looks, and actions the character commits that are so subtle in their foreshadowing, but so brilliant. At first glance, things like disobeying Ripley's orders and letting Dallas, Lambert, and Kane back into the ship despite that being a breach of quarantine procedure seem normal. You very easily look at that and think that he's just being noble and caring towards his crew. But on rewatch, you realize he's analyzing the situation and trying to figure out how he can get the alien back to Earth. It's brilliant storytelling with so many seemingly insignificant throwaway lines like Dallas saying, "Will you just listen to the man to Parker?" which have so much weight and significance on rewatch. The way in which Ridley Scott builds suspense is masterful. Scott very wisely chooses to go the Jaws route and not show the alien that much. In fact, it's fair to say the creature has very little screen time, but this is by no means a loss because it creates this overwhelming sense of paranoia whenever the alien appears or is even just nearby. This metaphor has been used before, but I really think it describes the film perfectly. The characters are essentially rats trapped in a maze being hunted by a seemingly unstoppable beast that could leap out from anywhere at any moment. The film never gives you a moment to breathe. Suspense continues to build and build with each new revelation and or death until it feels like it can't build anymore, but somehow it just keeps on going. It is because of this approach that whenever the creature strikes, it's almost always when you least expect it to. This film is genuinely a masterclass in suspenseful horror. The overall style of the film is striking in of itself because it feels like a subtle warping of reality. As I've said, the design of the Nostromo is very realistic and logical, but this is wonderfully juxtaposed with the alien planet which defies all understanding of reality and logic. The rock formations and geography of the planet look nothing like the geography of Earth, and the derelict ship is a combination of bones, machinery, and H.R. Giger's sexual imagery. Truly baffling in its design, but it encourages a sense of wonder while also disturbing you. Jerry Goldsmith's incredible score for the film is very subtle yet prevalently bombastic as it features the sounds of low rumbles and beating hearts, as well as an unrelenting wind which produces an ear-piercing shriek, creating a foreboding and eerie ambience. In every way, this film feels like a dream sequence, or more accurately, a nightmare sequence, as reality as perceived by the characters is taken and warped into something skewed and detestably horrifying. There are two cuts of the film, the theatrical cut and the director's cut. And while the theatrical cut is still amazing, I actually prefer the director's cut. I'm not saying I necessarily needed to know what happened to Barrett and Dallas when the alien took them, because it is still terrifying when you don't know what happened to them, but I really like the scene where Ripley finds them cocooned in a nest of sorts that the alien has built. I actually like seeing what happened to them because it raises more questions, like why did the alien cocoon them? Why did the alien keep them alive, and what was it doing to them? It ultimately makes the alien more terrifying because it adds more layers of mystery. Speaking of which, my favorite addition in the director's cut is a shot which loads of people at this point have talked about, but I'm not going to be an exception. It's when Barrett is walking around looking for Jones the cat, and the scene just cuts to a wide of the alien just hanging there. This is our first proper look at the adult creature, and there's no jump scare or even a big musical reveal. That's how it is in the theatrical cut, and it still really works, but I much prefer this subtle introduction because it's just a wide shot of the alien hanging there. You almost don't even notice it, but once you do, it's chill-inducing. It's probably my favorite shot of all time. Alien is the quintessential science fiction horror movie. It's almost no wonder so many films that came after it have tried to replicate it. It is one of the scariest and most suspenseful movies ever made. It has an incredible protagonist, likable and engaging characters, and marvelous special effects and production design. It has stood the test of time in so many ways, and I would even argue it is Dan O'Bannon and Ridley Scott's best film. It's one of the best movies ever made, and without a doubt, a masterpiece.